They threw her out on a rainy Tuesday with nothing but a garbage bag of clothes and a broken heart. Beatrice, her mother-in-law, laughed in her face, calling her a penniless gold digger, while her husband, Jacob, didn't even look up from his phone. They thought they had won. They thought they had discarded trash. But they made one fatal calculation. They judged Elisa by her worn-out shoes, not her bloodline. They didn't know that the man who had just died in Zurich wasn't just an estranged father. He was Arthur Sterling, the shadow billionaire who owned half the city. And Elisa? She wasn't just a victim. She was the sole heir. And revenge is best served expensive. The mahogany doors of the Montgomery estate had always felt heavy, but today they felt like the gates of a prison slamming shut behind her. Elisa stood on the wet pavement of the circular driveway, the rain soaking through her thin cardigan almost instantly. At her feet lay 2 black trash bags, her life reduced to polyethylene and pity. Inside the foyer, safe behind the glass, stood Beatrice Montgomery. The matriarch of the family held a crystal tumbler of scotch, her lips curled in a sneer that had become her default expression whenever Elisa entered a room. Beside her was Jacob, her husband of 3 years, the man who had once promised to protect her from the world, now hiding behind his mother's shoulder like a frightened child. "Don't come back begging when the money runs out, Elisa." Beatrice's voice was muffled by the glass, but the venom was clear. "We checked the accounts. You have $40 to your name. Good luck finding a shelter that takes strays." Jacob finally looked up, his eyes meeting Elisa's for a split second. There was no remorse there, only relief. He was finally free to pursue Tiffany, the shipping heiress he'd been parading around town for the last 6 months. Tiffany, who drove a Porsche and laughed at Elisa's thrift store dresses. Elisa didn't scream. She didn't bang on the door. She simply picked up the wet bags, her knuckles turning white. The humiliation wasn't just today. It had been a slow drip of poison for 3 years, the way Beatrice would introduce her at galas as Jacob's little charity case, the way they forgot to invite her to family vacations, the way Jacob stopped wearing his ring because he said it irritated his skin, only for Elisa to find receipts for diamond bracelets from Cartier, bracelets she never received. They had forced her to sign a divorce settlement that morning. It was brutal. No alimony, no claim to the marital assets, no housing support. Beatrice had hired the fiercest sharks in New York, and Elisa, who couldn't afford a lawyer, had simply signed. She was tired of fighting. She was tired of being the punchline in the Montgomerys' cruel joke. "Goodbye, Jacob," she whispered to the rain. She began the long walk down the driveway toward the iron gates. She didn't have money for an Uber. She would have to walk 3 miles to the bus station. As she trudged through the mud, a sleek silver Mercedes convertible sped past her, splashing muddy water up her legs. She saw the flash of blonde hair in the passenger seat. Tiffany. She was laughing, her head thrown back, Jacob's hand visible on the steering wheel. They were celebrating. Elisa reached the bus stop, shivering uncontrollably. She sat on the cold metal bench, pulling her knees to her chest. She was 26 years old. She had no degree, having dropped out to support Jacob while he finished his MBA, no savings and no family. Or so she thought. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. It was a cracked iPhone 7 she'd had for 5 years. The screen was wet, making it hard to read. Unknown caller. She almost didn't answer. Creditors? Jacob calling to twist the knife. "Hello?" Her voice cracked. "Is this Elisa Sterling?" A man's voice. Deep, formal, accented. Swiss? German? "It's Elisa Montgomery. Or, I guess, Sterling again," she corrected herself, feeling the fresh sting of the name change. "Who is this?" "My name is Friedrich von Holloway. I am calling from the offices of Sterling, Vance and Partners in Zurich. I have been trying to reach you for 3 weeks, Mrs. Sterling. It is imperative that we speak." "I don't have any money for whatever you're selling," Elisa said, tears finally mixing with the rain on her cheeks. "Please, just leave me alone." "I am not selling anything, Elisa." The voice softened, losing its corporate edge. "I am calling about your father, Arthur Sterling." Elisa went rigid. "My father left when I was 4. He was a mechanic. I haven't seen him in 20 years. "He was a mechanic once, yes," Friedrich said. "But people change, Elisa. And Arthur Sterling changed the world. I am sorry to be the one to tell you this, but your father passed away 4 days ago." Elisa felt a hollow thud in her chest. Not grief, exactly. How do you grieve a ghost? But a finality. The door to ever knowing him was now closed forever. "Okay," she said softly. "Thank you for telling me. But I can't pay for a funeral. I have nothing." There was a pause on the line. A long, heavy silence. "Elisa," Friedrich said, his voice dropping to a whisper, "you do not need to pay for the funeral. The funeral was held in Bern, attended by the Prime Minister and the heads of the European Bank. What you need to do is come to our offices in Manhattan, 432 Park Avenue, the penthouse suite." "Why?" "Because, my dear, he didn't just leave a will. He left an empire, and you are the only name on the document." The bus ride to the city was a blur. Elisa sat squeezed between a man smelling of stale tobacco and a woman shouting into her phone, but she heard none of it. Her mind was stuck on the phrase, the Prime Minister. Her father, Arthur, the man her mother had cried over, cursing him for leaving them with a stack of unpaid bills and a rusted Ford Fiesta. When she arrived in Manhattan, the rain had stopped, leaving the city slick and glistening. She looked down at her clothes, cheap leggings, mud-splattered sneakers, and a soaking wet hoodie. She looked like a vagrant. She walked to 432 Park Avenue. The building towered over the city, a needle scratching the sky. The doorman, a man in a uniform that cost more than her entire wardrobe, stepped forward to block her path. "Deliveries are around the back, miss," he said, his nose wrinkling slightly. "I'm here to see Friedrich von Holloway," Elisa said, standing as tall as her 5'4" frame allowed. The doorman smirked. "Mr. von Holloway does not see—" "Let her in, Roberts." The voice came from the lobby. A man in a charcoal 3-piece suit strode toward the glass doors. He was older, perhaps 60, with silver hair and eyes that looked like they had seen everything and found it all mildly amusing. The doorman blanched. "Mr. von Holloway, I didn't know she was a guest." Friedrich opened the door himself. "She is not a guest, Roberts. She is the owner." Elisa stepped inside, the blast of air conditioning hitting her wet skin. Friedrich didn't offer a handshake. Instead, he offered a warm, thick towel he had seemingly conjured from nowhere. "Come," he said. "We have tea upstairs, and dry clothes." The elevator ride was silent and impossibly fast. When the doors opened, Elisa gasped. The office wasn't an office. It was a sanctuary in the clouds. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a 360-degree view of New York City. The furniture was modern, sparse, and terrified her with its obvious cost. Friedrich led her to a leather chair and poured tea from a silver pot. "I don't understand," Elisa said, her hands shaking as she took the cup. "My father. He was nobody." Friedrich sat opposite her, opening a leather folder. "Arthur was a genius, Elisa. After he left, which he always regretted, by the way, he moved to Europe. He invented a specific type of microconductor used in nearly every smartphone on the planet. He founded Vertex Holdings. He didn't just make money. He made history. He slid a photograph across the desk. It was an old man, looking frail, sitting in a garden in Switzerland. But the eyes, they were Elisa's eyes. "He watched you," Friedrich said softly. "From a distance. He knew about your marriage to Mr. Montgomery. He knew about the way they treated you." Elisa looked up, sharp. "He knew, and he did nothing?" "He wanted to intervene," Friedrich admitted. "Many times. But Arthur was a man of peculiar principles. He wanted to see if you would stand on your own. He wanted to see if the Montgomery boy loved you, or if he was just another social climber. When he found out about the divorce, about the infidelity, Friedrich's jaw tightened. Arthur was in the hospital then. It broke him. Elisa felt a surge of anger. "So I was a test subject?" "No, you were his hope, and now you are his legacy." Friedrich pulled a document from the folder. It was thick, bound in blue velvet. "The Montgomery family," Friedrich began, his tone shifting to business. "They are considered wealthy in New York social circles, correct?" "Yes," Elisa murmured. "Beatrice always says they are old money." Friedrich chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "Old money? The Montgomery estate is valued at roughly $40 million, most of it tied up in non-liquid assets and failing real estate." He tapped the blue document. "Elisa, the liquid assets Arthur left you, cash, stocks, bonds, total $4.2 billion. That does not include the real estate portfolio, the patent rights, or the majority share in Vertex Holdings." The room spun. Elisa gripped the armrests. "Billion. With a B." "With a B," Friedrich confirmed. "You could buy the Montgomery family, burn their estate to the ground, rebuild it, and not even notice the dip in your bank account." Elisa stared at the city below. Somewhere down there, Jacob and Beatrice were likely toasting to their victory, laughing about the poor girl they'd kicked to the curb. "But there is a condition," Friedrich said. Elisa looked back at him. "There always is. Arthur knew you were kind. Too kind, perhaps. He didn't want this money to be eaten up by guilt or manipulative ex-husbands. The trust is fully yours, but for the first 6 months, I am to act as your, let's call it, strategic advisor. We don't just hand you the check, we secure your position." Friedrich leaned forward, a glint in his eye. "The Montgomerys humiliated you. They stripped you of your dignity. Arthur left specific instructions regarding them." "What kind of instructions?" "He bought their debt." Friedrich smiled, and it was the smile of a shark sensing blood. 2 weeks before he died, Vertex Holdings acquired the loans on the Montgomery estate and Jacob's failing tech startup. Technically, Elisa, you are now their landlord, and their bank. Elisa sat back, the realization washing over her like a tidal wave. She wasn't just rich, she held the leash. "They don't know?" she asked. "No one knows. The transfer of the debt was done through shell companies. As far as they know, they owe money to a faceless conglomerate called Valkyrie Corp." Elisa looked down at her muddy sneakers. Then she looked at the reflection in the window. A wet, tired girl. But behind that girl was the city. Her city. "What do I have to do?" Elisa asked, her voice steady for the first time that day. Friedrich closed the folder. "First, we get you a stylist. Then, we attend the grandest event of the season. The Gilded Charity Gala is this Saturday. I believe Beatrice Montgomery is the chairperson." "She is," Elisa said. "It's her pride and joy." "Excellent," Friedrich stood up. "Then that is where we will introduce the new Elisa Sterling to the world. But we won't tell them who you are. Not yet. Let them wonder. Let them panic." He extended a hand. Are you ready to play the game, Miss Sterling? Elisa looked at the hand. Then she thought of Jacob's face as he looked away from her. She thought of Beatrice's laughter through the glass. She took Friedrich's hand. I'm ready. The next 72 hours were a violent erasure of the old Elisa. Friedrich didn't just book her a room, he secured the Ty Warner penthouse at the Four Seasons. When Elisa walked in, smelling faintly of mildew from her old life, the staff didn't blink. They treated her with a reverence she had only ever seen directed at Beatrice. The transformation began the next morning. Friedrich brought in Isabella Vance, an image consultant known in Manhattan circles as the architect. She was a severe woman in her late 40s with an asymmetrical haircut and eyes that assessed Elisa like a fixer-upper property. Posture, Isabella snapped within seconds of meeting her. You hunch! You're carrying the weight of poverty. Drop it. Shoulders back. Chin up. You own the ground you walk on. Remember that. Isabella threw out everything Elisa owned. The threadbare jeans, the faded sweaters, even the comfortable sneakers. If you dress like a victim, they will treat you like prey, Isabella declared, tossing a pair of worn leggings into a silk refuse bag. Then came the shopping. It wasn't the joyous spree shown in movies. It was a strategic operation. They shut down sections of Bergdorf Goodman and Sachs. Elisa, who used to hyperventilate spending $50 on groceries, watched as Isabella pointed at items without looking at price tags. A cashmere coat that cost more than Jacob's car. Handmade Italian leather boots. Jewelry that felt too heavy to wear, laden with diamonds and emeralds. At first, Elisa protested. This is too much, Isabella. I don't need... Isabella stopped, holding up a midnight blue silk blouse. Listen to me. These people, the Montgomerys and their ilk, they are predators. They sniff out weakness. Your clothes are your armor. Your hair is your crown. When you walk into that gala, you need to look like you could buy the entire building and turn it into a closet. Do you understand? Elisa looked in the mirror. She saw the tired eyes, the slumped shoulders of a woman who had just been discarded. She thought of Tiffany's smug laugh in the Mercedes. Yes, Elisa said, straightening her spine. I understand. The final piece was the hair. A celebrity stylist cut inches off her mousy brown hair, shaping it into a sharp, glossy, shoulder-length bob. They dyed it a rich, deep chocolate that caught the light like obsidian. When the makeup artist finished contouring her face, highlighting cheekbones she didn't know she had, Elisa looked in the mirror and stared. The woman staring back wasn't Jacob's mousy little wife. She was sharp, dangerous, and incredibly expensive. On the afternoon of the gala, Friedrich arrived at the penthouse with a long garment box and a security guard holding a briefcase. The dress, Friedrich announced. Custom Givenchy. It was commissioned for an Arabian princess who unfortunately eloped before she could wear it. Isabella had it tailored for you overnight. The dress was black velvet, strapless, with a neckline that plunged just enough to be daring but not vulgar. It fit her body like a second skin, pooling slightly at her feet. Then, the guard opened the briefcase. Inside sat a necklace that made Elisa gasp. It was a cascade of sapphires and diamonds, culminating in a teardrop sapphire the size of a quail egg. The Star of Geneva, Friedrich said nonchalantly. It's from your father's private collection, valued at roughly 12 million. It goes well with your eyes. As Elisa stood fully dressed, looking out over the city lights from 52 stories up, she felt a shift inside her. The fear was gone, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. The money hadn't just changed her appearance, it had unlocked a cage she hadn't realized she was in. Friedrich, she said, her voice lower, firmer. Yes, Mrs. Sterling. Let's go crash a party. The Metropolitan Museum of Art was ablaze with light. The gilded charity gala was the event of the season, a peacock parade where New York's elite came to pretend they cared about charity while aggressively judging each other's net worth. Beatrice Montgomery stood near the entrance of the Temple of Dender, holding court in a shimmering silver gown that was slightly too tight. She was smiling, but her eyes were frantic. "Marcus, darling, so glad you could make it," she air-kissed a banking CEO. Beatrice was stressed. The mysterious Valkyrie Corp that had bought their debt was demanding an immediate review of their assets. If they foreclosed, the Montgomery name would be mud. This gala had to be perfect. She needed to secure new investors tonight. Beside her, Jacob was preening. He had Tiffany on his arm. Tiffany was wearing a hot pink dress that was far too short for the occasion, giggling too loudly at jokes she didn't understand. "Your mother seems tense, Jules." Tiffany popped her gum, a habit Beatrice loathed. "She's fine," Jacob dismissed, checking his reflection in a polished silver tray. "Just the usual pre-show jitters. Besides, I'm finally free of the dead weight. Tonight is about celebration." He squeezed Tiffany's hip. He hadn't thought of Elisa once in 4 days. Suddenly, the ambient noise of the cocktail hour shifted. The murmur of conversation dipped, then died out completely. It started at the entrance. Heads turned. Whispers hissed like steam. Jacob looked toward the massive archway. "Who is that?" A woman stood there, framed by the ancient Egyptian sandstone. She was flanked by Friedrich von Holloway, a man known to everyone in the room as the Grim Reaper of high finance. But nobody was looking at Friedrich. The woman was a vision in black velvet. She didn't just walk, she glided. Every step was deliberate, oozing a lazy confidence that commanded attention. The sapphires around her neck caught the museum lights, sending shards of blue fire across the room. "My God," someone whispered near Beatrice. "Is that the Star of Geneva? I haven't seen that since the Christie's auction in '98. Beatrice narrowed her eyes. Who was this usurper stealing her thunder? She didn't recognize the woman. The hair, the makeup, the sheer aura of power. It was unfamiliar. As the couple approached the receiving line, Jacob felt his mouth go dry. The woman was stunning. Breathtakingly so. She possessed a cold beauty that made Tiffany look cheap and cartoonish by comparison. Beatrice stepped forward, her socialite mask firmly in place. "Mr. von Holloway, a surprise to see you outside of Zurich. And who is your lovely companion?" Friedrich smiled, a thin expression that didn't reach his eyes. "Beatrice, a pleasure. Allow me to introduce the primary shareholder of the firm I represent." The woman in black turned her gaze to Beatrice. Her eyes were cool, detached, and eerily familiar. "Hello, Beatrice," the woman said. Her voice was smooth, like velvet over gravel. Beatrice froze. That voice. She peered closer, past the diamonds, past the contouring, past the $10,000 haircut. "Elisa," Beatrice whispered, the name strangling in her throat. A ripple of shock went through the immediate circle. Jacob dropped his champagne flute. It shattered loudly on the stone floor, champagne splashing onto Tiffany's pink shoes. "Jacob, my Louboutins!" Tiffany shrieked. Jacob ignored her. He stared at his ex-wife. The mouse he had kicked out in the rain 4 days ago was gone. In her place was a panther. "You look well," Elisa said to Jacob, her eyes sweeping over him dismissively before landing on Tiffany. She offered Tiffany a small, pitying smile, the kind one gives a child who has dressed up in mommy's clothes. "What is the meaning of this?" Beatrice hissed, abandoning all pretense of etiquette. "How dare you crash my event? Security." "I wouldn't do that, Beatrice," Elisa said softly, but her voice carried in the silent room. "And why not? You're trespassing. You're a penniless nobody wearing borrowed jewelry." Beatrice's voice was rising to a screech. Elisa laughed. It was a dark, genuine laugh that chilled Jacob to the bone. "Borrowed?" Elisa reached up and touched the massive center sapphire. "Hardly. And as for trespassing, Friedrich, did we not purchase a platinum table for this evening?" "We did, madam," Friedrich confirmed loudly. "A $50,000 donation. Cleared this morning." Beatrice looked like she'd swallowed a lemon. Elisa had donated more in one morning than Beatrice had managed to squeeze out of her friends in a month. "Shall we find our seats?" Elisa said to Friedrich, turning her naked back to the Montgomerys. "Elisa, wait!" Jacob stepped forward, instinct taking over. He reached out to grab her arm, a move he used to control her. Before his fingers could graze the velvet, a large man in a discreet suit, the security guard from earlier, materialized from the crowd and blocked Jacob's path with a granite forearm. Jacob stumbled back, humiliated. Elisa stopped and turned her head slightly over her shoulder. "Careful, Jacob," she murmured, her eyes flashing like the sapphires she wore. "The rules have changed. You don't get to touch me anymore." She walked away into the ballroom, the crowd parting for her like the Red Sea, leaving the Montgomerys standing amid the shattered glass of their own assumptions. Dinner was a battlefield, and Elisa was the commanding general. She was seated at the center table, the Platinum Circle, flanked by the mayor of New York and the CEO of a major tech rival of Jacob's failing startup. Friedrich sat beside her, acting as both shield and translator of the high society subtext. From her vantage point, Elisa could see the Montgomerys. They had been relegated to table 14, near the kitchen doors. It was a subtle slight. The seating chart had likely been rearranged the moment Friedrich's $50,000 check cleared, but to Beatrice, it was a slap in the face. Elisa watched as Beatrice furiously whispered to a waiter, gesturing wildly at her place setting, while Jacob downed his third scotch, his eyes fixed gloomily on Elisa's back. "She's staring holes into your velvet," Friedrich murmured, taking a sip of sparkling water. "Let her stare," Elisa replied, cutting her filet mignon with surgical precision. "She used to stare at me like I was a stain on her carpet. I prefer being the sun she can't look at directly." Throughout the meal, a steady stream of elites approached the table. Men who had previously looked through Elisa as if she were made of glass now bent over backwards to kiss her hand. Women who had mocked her off-brand purses now complimented her daring anonymity. Elisa played the part perfectly, cool, gracious, and utterly vague about her sudden ascension. Then came the main event, the live auction. This was Beatrice's arena. Every year she made a point of winning the showcase item to assert the Montgomery dominance. This year, the item was a 19th century emerald brooch that had once belonged to a Romanov duchess. It was valued at $300,000. The auctioneer, a boisterous man with a British accent, took the stage. And now, lot number 45, the Romanov emerald. Bidding starts at $50,000. Beatrice's hand shot up instantly at table 14. She needed this win. She needed to show the room that the Montgomerys were still solvent, despite the rumors. $50,000 from Mrs. Montgomery. Do I hear 60? 60, a voice called out from the back. 70, Beatrice shouted, glaring around the room. The price climbed steadily. 80, 100, 150. The room grew quiet. This was high stakes for a piece of jewelry, even for this crowd. 200,000 going to Mrs. Montgomery, the auctioneer called out. Beatrice looked triumphant. She adjusted her silver shawl, a smug smile returning to her face. 200 was her limit, but she had won. 500,000, a calm voice cut through the silence. The room gasped. It wasn't a bid, it was a declaration of war. Beatrice whipped her head around. Elisa hadn't even raised her paddle. She was simply leaning back, swirling her wine, looking bored. Friedrich held her paddle. Number 1, aloft. 500,000, the auctioneer stammered. From table 1. Beatrice turned purple. 500,000 was insane. It was more than the brooch was worth. It was more than she had in her liquid accounts. But she couldn't let her, the girl she had kicked out of her house 4 days ago, beat her. 550! Beatrice shrieked, her voice cracking. The room murmured. Jacob grabbed his mother's arm. "Mum, stop. We don't have that cash. The line of credit is frozen, remember?" "Shut up," Beatrice hissed, shaking him off. "I will not lose to trash." Elisa turned her head slowly, locking eyes with Beatrice across the dimly lit ballroom. She offered a small, terrifyingly polite smile. $1 million, Elisa said. The silence that followed was absolute. A pin dropping would have sounded like a gunshot. 1 million? The auctioneer looked like he might faint. Do I hear 1,000,001? Beatrice stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. $1 million would bankrupt the estate's operating fund for the year. It was suicide. She slumped back down, defeated. The humiliation was total. "Sold! For $1 million to the lady at table 1. Applause erupted, but it was tentative, shocked. Later, as the guests mingled for coffee, Jacob finally worked up the courage to approach Elisa. He left Tiffany pouting by the dessert bar and cornered Elisa near the balcony. "Elisa," he started, his voice thick with alcohol and false charm. "Look, you look incredible." Elisa turned, examining him like a biological specimen. "Hello, Jacob. You look tired. The stress of the shipping business catching up with you?" He flinched. "Look, about the other day. Mum. She got in my head. You know how she is. I didn't want to sign those papers. I was confused. You seemed very clear when you were laughing in the Mercedes with Tiffany," Elisa said, her voice devoid of emotion. "Tiffany is a fling," Jacob pleaded, stepping closer, lowering his voice. "She means nothing. Babe, listen. We can fix this. You obviously came into some money. A lottery? Insurance? We can combine assets. Imagine the power couple we could be. I can run the business side. You can be the face." Elisa laughed. It was a cold, sharp sound. "You want to run the business side?" She stepped into his personal space, smelling the expensive scotch on his breath. "Jacob, you couldn't run a lemonade stand without bankrupting it. Your startup is bleeding cash. Your proprietary algorithm is a joke in the valley." Jacob's face went pale. "How do you know that?" "I know everything, Jacob," she whispered. "I know about the second mortgage on the estate. I know about the loans you took from the Cayman shell companies to hide your losses from the board." She reached out and patted his cheek. It was a patronizing, humiliating gesture. "Go home, Jacob. Take your mother and your shipping heiress, and go home. You're going to need your rest for Monday morning." "Why?" Jacob stammered, fear finally replacing greed in his eyes. "What happens on Monday?" Elisa smiled, and it was the smile of the executioner. "On Monday, the landlord comes to collect." Monday morning broke grey and rainy, mirroring the mood inside the Montgomery household. Beatrice had spent Sunday in a migraine-induced stupor, while Jacob frantically called his accountants, trying to figure out how Elisa knew about the Cayman loans. At 8:30 a.m., a courier arrived at the estate. He delivered a heavy cream envelope, embossed with a silver V, to Ms. Beatrice Montgomery and Mr. Jacob Montgomery, regarding immediate loan review and asset audit, from Vertex Holdings and subsidiaries, formerly Valkyrie Corp. Location, 432 Park Avenue, Suite 900. Time, 10 a.m. today. Attendance mandatory. Vertex Holdings. Beatrice squinted at the paper over her coffee. They're the ones who bought our debt from the bank last week. Why do they want a meeting in person? Usually these things are emails. Maybe they want to restructure, Jacob suggested, hopeful. Maybe they saw the gala. They know we have social capital. Of course. Beatrice straightened her silk robe. They probably want to offer us better terms. We are the Montgomerys, after all. Get dressed, Jacob. Wear the navy suit. We need to look solvent. They arrived at 432 Park Avenue at 9:55 a.m. The lobby was intimidating, minimal and sleek. They were escorted not to a cubicle, but to the private elevator. Top floor? Jacob whispered nervously as the numbers climbed. This is serious. The elevator opened directly into a boardroom that spanned the entire floor. The walls were glass, overlooking the city. A long table made of black obsidian sat in the center. At the head of the table sat a high-backed leather chair, turned away from them, facing the window. Friedrich von Holloway stood by the window, holding a file. Mr. von Holloway? Beatrice gasped. You work for Vertex? I am the senior counsel for Vertex Holdings, yes, Friedrich said, turning around. Please, sit. Beatrice and Jacob sat. They looked small in the massive chairs. We are here to discuss the outstanding liabilities of the Montgomery estate and J-Tech Solutions, Friedrich began without preamble. Currently, the combined debt stands at $42 million. Payments have been missed for 3 consecutive quarters on the commercial loans. There was a cash flow issue, Jacob interrupted, sweating, but we are about to close a Series B funding round. There is no Series B, Jacob, a voice came from the high-backed chair. The chair slowly swiveled around. Beatrice dropped her alligator skin purse. Jacob stopped breathing. Elisa sat there. She was wearing a white power suit that looked sharp enough to cut glass. Her hair was pulled back in a severe, elegant bun. She didn't look like an ex-wife. She looked like a CEO. Elisa, Beatrice whispered, what are you doing here? Did you get a job as a secretary? Elisa didn't smile. She didn't blink. She simply placed her hands on the table. I am not the secretary, Beatrice. I am the chairman of the board. I am the majority shareholder of Vertex Holdings. She let the silence stretch, enjoying the way the color drained from their faces, leaving them gray and aged. My father, Elisa continued, her voice steady, was Arthur Sterling, founder of Vertex. When he died last week, I inherited everything, including your debt. No, Beatrice shook her head, denial clamping down on her mind. No, that's impossible. You're a nobody. You came from a trailer park. And you live in a house you haven't actually owned since 2018, Elisa shot back, sliding a file across the table. I've reviewed the terms of your loans. There is a clause, Clause 4B. In the event of a transfer of debt ownership, the new creditor reserves the right to call the full principal amount due immediately if the debtor's credit rating falls below a certain threshold. Elisa tapped the file. Your credit rating is abysmal. You've been living on credit cards and nostalgia for a decade. You can't do this, Jacob said, his voice trembling. We were married. I'm your husband. Ex-husband, Elisa corrected. And you signed a divorce settlement 5 days ago that explicitly waived all rights to my assets, present or future. Beatrice made sure the language was ironclad. She wanted to protect your money from me. Ironically, she protected my billions from you. Beatrice looked like she was having a stroke. The irony was a physical blow. She had hired the lawyers. She had insisted on the total separation of assets to ensure the gold digger got nothing. and in doing so, she had walled herself off from the only fortune that could save her. "What do you want?" Beatrice croaked. "I want the house," Elisa said simply. "The estate?" Beatrice screeched. "It's been in the family for 4 generations." "And it ends with you," Elisa said. "I'm calling the loan. You owe me $42 million, payable by close of business today. If you can't pay, I foreclose. I take the house, I take the cars, I take Jacob's company IP, I take everything." "We don't have 42 million, Jacob cried. "I know," Elisa leaned forward. "So here is my offer. You have 24 hours to vacate the Montgomery estate. You leave the furniture, the art, and the keys. You take only your personal clothing. In exchange, I forgive the debt. You walk away with 0, but you walk away debt-free. You don't go to prison for the fraud you committed on those loan applications, Jacob." Jacob froze. She knew about the fraud. "You can't kick us out on the street," Beatrice sobbed, the tears finally real. "Where will we go?" Elisa stood up, walking over to the window to look out at the city that was now her kingdom. She remembered the rain. She remembered the trash bags. She remembered the laughter. She turned back to them, her face hard as stone. "I hear the shelter on 4th Street takes strays. Good luck." The Tuesday following the board meeting did not bring rain. Instead, the sun hung high and bright over the Montgomery estate, a cruel spotlight illuminating the final act of a tragedy that had been years in the making. The heat was oppressive, baking the asphalt of the circular driveway where the grand dynasty of Jacob and Beatrice was being dismantled, box by cardboard box. It was 11:00 a.m., the deadline set by the legal team at Vertex Holdings. The scene was a hive of clinical, silent activity. 2 massive moving trucks were parked near the portico, but they were not the discreet, unmarked vans the Montgomerys usually hired. These were emblazoned with the stark, geometric logo of Vertex Asset Recovery. A team of 12 auditors, dressed in identical grey polo shirts, moved with the efficiency of a colony of ants. They weren't just moving furniture. They were cataloguing evidence. Beatrice Montgomery sat on the bottom step of the grand stone staircase that led to the front doors. For 30 years, she had stood at the top of these stairs, greeting senators, oil tycoons, and celebrities with a glass of champagne in hand. Now, she was relegated to the bottom step, sitting on the cold stone like a vagrant. Beside her sat a single Louis Vuitton steamer trunk. It was the only item the auditors had cleared for her to take: her clothing, her toiletries, and a small box of family photographs. Everything else, the jewelry, the art, the furniture, even the silverware, was now the property of the creditor. Beatrice watched, her eyes hollow and rimmed with red, as 2 men carried out a massive oil painting in a gilded frame. "Careful!" she shrieked, her voice cracking. "That is a 19th century sergeant. You're holding it like it's a poster from a dorm room." One of the auditors didn't even look at her. He simply checked a number on his clipboard. "Item 402. Seized. Load it up." "It's not an item," Beatrice whimpered, burying her face in a silk handkerchief that was already soaked with tears. "It's my legacy." A few yards away, Jacob was pacing in tight, frantic circles. He looked nothing like the polished playboy who had sipped scotch at the gala just days before. He was wearing yesterday's dress shirt, the collar unbuttoned, sweat staining the armpits. He hadn't shaved, and his eyes darted around the property with the wild energy of a trapped animal. He was clutching his phone, his thumb hammering the screen. "Pick up, pick up, pick up," he muttered, his voice trembling. "Come on, Tiff, don't do this to me." He had been calling Tiffany for 16 hours. At first, he thought she was asleep. Then, he thought she was busy. Now, the cold reality was beginning to seep in, but Jacob's narcissism was a powerful shield. He convinced himself there was a misunderstanding. If he could just explain that this was a temporary liquidity issue, a strategic bankruptcy, she would understand. They were a power couple. They were Jacob and Tiffany. Suddenly, the distinct rumble of a high-performance engine cut through the sound of packing tape and shuffling boots. Jacob's head snapped up. A silver Mercedes SL convertible turned through the wrought iron gates, the sunlight gleaming off its polished hood. She came, Jacob breathed, a pathetic smile breaking across his face. He ran a hand through his messy hair and adjusted his shirt. I knew it. She's loyal. He jogged toward the car as it rolled to a stop near the fountain. Beatrice didn't even look up. She was too busy mourning her porcelain collection. The window of the Mercedes rolled down. Tiffany sat in the driver's seat. She looked immaculate, wearing oversized Celine sunglasses and a white tennis outfit. She looked like summer. She looked like money. "Babe!" Jacob reached for the door handle, but it was locked. He laughed nervously. "God, am I glad to see you. It's been a nightmare. Elisa has gone completely psycho. She's seized the house. But don't worry, I have a plan. We just need to lay low at your place in the Hamptons for a week while I get the lawyers to—" Tiffany held up a manicured hand, stopping him mid-sentence. She didn't take off her sunglasses. She didn't even turn her head to look at him fully. "Jacob," she said. Her voice was bored. "I'm not here for a rescue mission. I'm here for my Callaway clubs. I left them in the mudroom last weekend." Jacob froze, his hand still hovering over the door handle. "Your golf clubs?" "Yes," Tiffany popped her gum. "I have a tea time at 1, and I really don't want to buy a new driver. Can you get them?" "Tiff, are you joking?" Jacob's voice rose to a desperate pitch. "I'm being evicted. My mother is crying on the stairs. I need a place to sleep." Tiffany finally turned to look at him. She lowered her sunglasses an inch, her blue eyes scanning him with a mixture of pity and disgust. It was the look one gives to roadkill. "Jacob, look at yourself," she said coldly. "You're a mess, and honestly, the wronged ex-husband look isn't cute. It's pathetic." "But you love me," Jacob stammered. "We were looking at rings." "I was looking at rings," Tiffany corrected. "You were looking for someone to fund your lifestyle because your mummy cut you off. And now that everyone knows the Montgomerys are broke, darling, you're social poison. If I'm seen with you, my stock drops. That's just business." She gestured to one of the Vertex security guards. "Excuse me? Can someone grab the pink golf bag from the garage? I don't want to wait all day." Jacob stepped back as if slapped. He watched, paralyzed, as the guard retrieved the clubs and placed them in the passenger seat, the seat where Jacob used to sit. "Ciao, Jacob," Tiffany said. She checked her reflection in the rearview mirror, applied a fresh coat of lip gloss, and sped away. She didn't look back. Jacob stood in the exhaust fumes, the silence of his abandonment ringing louder than the engine. He turned slowly and walked back to the stairs, collapsing beside his mother. "She left me," Jacob whispered, the shock finally breaking his denial. "They all leave when the check bounces, Jacob," Beatrice hissed, her voice venomous. "I told you she was trash, just like Elisa." "Elisa didn't leave because of money," Jacob said, a sudden clarity piercing his fog. "Elisa stayed when we had nothing. I was the one who left." Before Beatrice could retort, the atmosphere in the driveway shifted again. The auditors stopped moving. The security guards straightened their posture. A black Rolls-Royce Phantom, silent and ominous as a storm cloud, glided through the gates. It moved with a weight and authority that the Mercedes lacked. It didn't speed. It arrived. The car stopped directly in front of the steps. The driver, a large man in a dark suit, opened the rear door. Elisa stepped out. Jacob and Beatrice braced themselves. They expected her to emerge in a ball gown, dripping in diamonds, gloating like a Disney villainess. They expected her to scream, to laugh, to point fingers. Instead, Elisa wore a pair of well-fitted dark jeans, white sneakers, and a simple black t-shirt. Her hair was pulled back in a ponytail. She held no purse, no jewelry, no props. She looked like the girl Jacob had met in the university library 7 years ago. Only her eyes were different. The soft, eager-to-please warmth was gone, replaced by the calm, immovable depth of the ocean. She walked up the driveway, the gravel crunching beneath her shoes. She stopped 10 feet from where they sat. "The inspection is complete," Elisa said. Her voice was conversational, devoid of anger. "The assets have been secured against the debt. You are free to go." Beatrice stood up, clutching her purse with trembling hands. She tried to summon the ghost of her former arrogance, but it crumbled before it reached her lips. "You must be so proud," Beatrice spat, though the words lacked heat. "You tricked us. You let us dig our own graves." "I didn't trick you, Beatrice," Elisa replied softly. "I simply stopped saving you from yourselves. You spent years buying things you couldn't afford to impress people who didn't like you. You committed fraud. You lied. You cheated. The grave was dug long before I showed up with a shovel." Jacob stood up, wiping his eyes. He looked at Elisa, really looked at her, for the first time in years. He saw the strength he had mistaken for weakness. He saw the beauty he had traded for flashiness. "Elisa," he choked out, taking a step forward. I know I messed up. I know I hurt you. But please, this house, it's my childhood. It's all I have. You can't just take it. Where will we go?" Elisa looked at the sprawling stone mansion behind them. It was a beautiful structure, but it was cold. It loomed over them, a monument to a family that had never known how to love, only how to own. "I'm not keeping it, Jacob," Elisa said. The admission stunned them both. "What?" Jacob blinked. "You're selling it? Then give us the money. If you sell it, the equity alone—" "There is no equity," Elisa cut him off. "The debt swallowed it all. But I'm not selling it either." She turned slightly, signaling Friedrich, who had been standing quietly by the car. He stepped forward and handed Elisa a large, glossy brochure. She held it out to Jacob. He took it, his hands shaking. The cover featured a rendering of the Montgomery estate, but the sign on the front gate had been changed. It no longer read Montgomery Manor. It read, "The Sterling Sanctuary, a safe haven for women and families." "You're turning my house into a homeless shelter," Beatrice gasped, clutching her chest as if she were having a coronary. "My ballroom, my gardens, filled with strays." "Not strays, Beatrice." Elisa's voice hardened, steel entering her tone. "Survivors. Women who have been financially abused. Women who were thrown out by their husbands with nothing but trash bags. Women who had no one to call." Elisa took a step closer to Beatrice, her gaze unwavering. "Starting next month, your ballroom will be a dormitory for mothers who need a safe place to sleep. Jacob's game room will be a daycare center. The wine cellar is being converted into a legal aid clinic to help women fight for what is rightfully theirs." "You can't do this," Jacob whispered, horrified. "It's a mockery." "It's redemption," Elisa corrected him. "This house has been a place of judgment and exclusion for 100 years. I'm scrubbing the walls clean. I'm turning a monument of greed into a beacon of hope. I think Arthur would have liked that." She looked at the house one last time, not with longing, but with the satisfaction of someone closing a heavy book. "There is a town car waiting at the gate," Elisa said, turning back to them. "The driver has instructions to take you to the Port Authority bus terminal." "The bus?" Beatrice cried. "We don't take the bus." "You do today," Elisa said. "I've purchased 2 one-way tickets to Dayton, Ohio." Beatrice froze. "Dayton? Why Dayton?" "I did some research," Elisa said, a faint, sad smile touching her lips. "Your sister lives there, the one you haven't spoken to in 20 years because she married a plumber. I called her. She's willing to take you in. It's a small 2-bedroom apartment, but she said family is family. I suggest you learn from her." "I hate you," Beatrice whispered, the tears flowing freely now. "I hate you more than anything in this world." "I know," Elisa nodded. "And once, that would have destroyed me. I used to stay awake at night, wondering how to make you love me. But today," she paused, letting the silence stretch. "Today I don't feel anything for you at all. I don't hate you, Beatrice. I don't love you. You are just people I used to know. And that indifference? That is my true freedom." Elisa turned her back on them. She walked toward the Rolls-Royce, her head high. She didn't look back as Jacob fell to his knees, sobbing into his hands. She didn't look back as Beatrice screamed at the sky. She slid into the cool leather interior of the car. Friedrich closed the door, shutting out the heat and the noise of the weeping Montgomerys. "To the airport, Mrs. Sterling?" Friedrich asked from the front seat. "Yes, Friedrich," Elisa said, buckling her seatbelt. "Zurich. I have a board meeting to attend." As the car pulled away, leaving the estate behind, Friedrich reached into his breast pocket. "Your father," he said softly. "He wanted you to have this only after the final papers were signed. He called it the post-game analysis." He handed her a thick, cream-colored envelope, sealed with red wax. Elisa took it, her fingers trembling slightly. She broke the seal and unfolded the heavy paper. The handwriting was jagged and strong, the script of a man who worked with his hands before he worked with millions. "My dearest Elisa, if you are reading this, the dust has settled. You have faced the dragons. I hope you didn't slay them with fire, but with the truth. That hurts them more. I am sorry I wasn't there to walk you down the aisle, and I am sorry I wasn't there to pull you out of that house when things got bad. I watched you from afar, and it broke my heart. But I knew that if I stepped in, I would only be saving you. I needed you to save yourself. The money I left you is massive, yes. It is terrifying. But remember this. Money is just fuel. You are the engine. The Montgomerys of the world think that money makes you noble. They think it makes them better. You have seen now that it only amplifies what is already there. For them, it amplified greed. For you, I hope it amplifies your heart. Don't just be rich, my little girl. Be formidable. Be dangerous to the cruel and a sanctuary to the kind. Build something that lasts longer than a stone house. I am so proud of the woman you have become. Love, Dad." Elisa pressed the letter to her chest. She looked out the window as New York City rushed by, a blur of steel and glass. She felt a tear roll down her cheek, but she didn't wipe it away. It wasn't a tear of sadness. It was a tear of release. The discarded doll was gone. The victim was gone. Elisa Sterling sat in the back of the car, watching the skyline approach. She had billions in the bank, a company to run, and a world to change. She took a deep breath, pulled out her phone, and dialed the number for the shelter architects. "Hello," she said, her voice strong and clear. "I'm ready to begin construction." And that is the story of how Elisa turned her darkest moment into her greatest victory. It's a powerful reminder that sometimes the people who treat you like trash are just afraid of the treasure you really are. Jacob and Beatrice thought power came from a bank account, but Elisa proved that true power comes from resilience, dignity, and knowing your own worth. Though, having a secret billionaire father certainly helps level the playing field. What do you think? Did Elisa go too far by taking their house? Or was it the perfect karma for how they treated her? And would you have forgiven Jacob if he begged? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of revenge and redemption, please smash that like button, share this with a friend who needs a little inspiration, and subscribe to the channel for more incredible real-life dramas and storytelling. Until next time.